Tutors, mentors, and the city with your host.com.
The City Tutors presents
Tutors, mentors, and the city
with your host.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kevin.com Brown, and thank you for joining us on Tutors, Mentors, and the City, brought to you by the City Tutors. So, as I do every episode, please join me in welcoming our guest. You know, this guy, y'all know I don't do any research, right? And I always go by the first question I ask is usually by the first thing that catches my eye. This guy has two first names. When you see someone two first names, you know they're going to be successful in life, right? Join me in welcoming our guest, Mr. Tyler Charles. Hey!
Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate it. Glad to be here with you today.
Yes, so Tyler, let's talk about the two first names for a second, all right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny story. I went to my high school orientation. I started high school in Chicago. The school was about 1,500 kids. We're all sitting in this auditorium waiting for our names to be called to say what class you were going to as a freshman. And I'm sitting there, and my uncle took me that day, and he's like, "Man, they didn't call your name yet. You would think that C would be at the top of the list." And lo and behold, they had my name backwards, and we were sitting there all the way till they got to the end, to the T's. And for like the first 3 months of high school, my name was Charles Tyler. They kept marking me absent for classes, and I'm like, "No, Ma, I'm in class. and they had it backwards. So yeah, I can definitely thank my parents for that one.
I could see that happening. You don't know, but I'm a stand-up comic by trade, and it's funny the things that observational comics. It's funny the things we observe right off the bat, right? No research. Nobody had to drop anything in my ear. I just read it and said, "This guy got two first names." If you have two first names, first of all, it's easy to mix them up. It's easy to flip them.
Yeah.
But typically, you don't see people with two first names not being successful. They're going to be successful at whatever they do. That's just something that comes along with the gift of the two first names.
Hey, well, that's my goal in life, is to be successful in any way.
Absolutely. So, Tyler, I'm going to ask my questions from the perspective of our viewers, and our viewers are typically CUNY students who are making the academic journey, making the transition from the academic world to their professional lives. And they may have questions, and you may have the answers. So my first question is going to be, Tyler Charles, who are you?
I am a product of the CUNY school system. I grew up, born in Michigan, grew up in New York, but also grew up a little bit in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. So got a mixture of New York and Chicago in me. I'm a father of four beautiful kids. I'm a social worker by trade. And I'm just, I'm a person who, really believes in inspiring the next generation, giving them the tips, the tools, and the things that I've learned thus far, because I have so much more to learn and still learning, and hope that I'm learning all the way up until the last breath that I take, because the moment you stop learning in life is the moment you stop growing. But just an average guy from New York who's trying to figure out how to make it, how to be successful, how to give back to my community, and how to just empower that next generation of people coming up after me.
That's a great answer, Tyler. I'm gonna tell you something, man. So I'm born and raised in New York, and I've always been chasing that bag. Born and raised in the Bronx, was raised by Harlem, and at the time that I was growing up, my generation, we were all chasing the bag, trying to get that money. But something happened to me after the pandemic. Everything that I had coveted prior to the pandemic was no longer important to me. Now I recognize my responsibility to society, to this country, to younger generations, to empower them and elevate them and all that kind of stuff. So when I meet like-minded people, particularly like-minded Black men, I really appreciate that. I really respect when I meet fellow Black men who recognize their responsibility. So kudos to you for that. But my question, I'm gonna back up on the question, because you mentioned Michigan, Chicago, and New York.
Yeah.
Okay. The hospital you were born in was where?
In Michigan. So I was
Okay.
born in Muskegon, Michigan. Don't know
Muskegon.
nothing about it.
How far is that from Detroit?
I have no idea, man. I left there as I went back there once, a few, because my father actually still lives there. I went back there once for the first time ever, as someone who can remember it, about 3 or 4 years ago for Christmas. But I think it's about like 3 or 4 hours from Detroit. But I've never, outside of that, I've never been there. It's just a name that's on the birth certificate. I was like, oh, okay, this is where I was born.
Copy that. Copy that. Okay. So, and then you mentioned South Side of Chicago. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so all of my family is from Chicago. Mom born and raised in Chicago. She lived here in New York as well, but all her brothers from Chicago. So all of my family is there. And at one point she moved back. I stayed here in New York with my uncle because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to go to Chicago. I was a New Yorker by heart, still am. But then when I started high school, I moved there and did about 2 years of high school actually in the city of Chicago. But I was always back and forth because my grandmother, my great grandmother, like I said, all my family is there. So summers and Christmases and every holiday break we was in Chicago. So really got a good experience and really just know the city well. And like I said, I'm just Obama's house is not too far from ours in Hyde Park, and even where he's building his presidential library. When I go home, I got to drive past it to go to the house, and so just Chicago is where my heart is. That's my second home as well.
Okay. So, were you in Chicago during the reign of the notorious Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls?
Of course, Michael Jordan was family, man. Grandma, we was taking down family photos, and it was pictures of Michael. We had to get around the TV, and not these new fancy TVs. I'm talking about the box TVs with the antenna that sat low on the floor that you had to turn to watch it. Like, yeah, we had to watch the Bulls games when they came on. It was a must.
Well, I'll tell you, as a diehard New Yorker, man, y'all was killing us. Y'all absolutely killed us, and there was nothing we could do about it.
At all. And don't say nothing bad about Michael Jordan. Still to this day, don't say nothing bad about him in front of the elders in the family.
Oh no, he's the GOAT. There's no denying. He was amazing. He was exciting. He destroyed some legacies of Patrick Ewing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but he's the GOAT, no doubt about that. But we were so close. We were so close,
and he took it away.
He spoiled some dreams for us. But okay, fair enough. I'll forgive you for that. All right. So when did you move to New York, and what was that? What was that transition like?
So we came to New York. I was about 5 when we moved here. My uncle lived here. My mother's youngest brother lived here. So myself, my mom, and my brother, we moved here. And ever since then, really, like my life has been in New York. I went to elementary here, middle school, and high school, graduated. But so really, all of my life is in New York. Like I'm a New Yorker, Bed-Stuy, by heart, right? Even so this is where I was raised, and this is really where my roots are. To be honest, is in New York. Although I lived in like other states, we lived in Philly for like 2 years, and I lived in St. Louis for like 2 years, or as like when I was like 3 or 4. So lived in a couple different areas, but I've always came back to New York. New York is where my heart is.
Okay, and so this is after you said you went to high school in Chicago.
Yeah, for 2 years.
So you graduated high school in Chicago, or you also went to high school in New York?
I also went here. So my sophomore year, I transferred back to New York, and then I just finished out my high school years here and graduated from New York.
Now, I went to high school in Brooklyn. I went to Brooklyn Tech. Where did you go to high school here?
So I went to a very unknown name high school. It was called Arts and Media Prep. It was right when the city started putting like schools inside of schools. So it was like a elementary, a middle school, and then we were the high school on the top. It was like one floor for the whole school, which was for me a big shock, a big culture shock because coming from Chicago, I was in a one of the largest high schools in Chicago. It was 1,500 students in that school. So I was coming from a school that spanned 6 blocks to a school that was one floor, and I was like, oh man, what is this? This is this is a culture shock for me.
Yeah. So, okay, you graduate from high school in Brooklyn. It's time to go to college. What's that like for you?
I had the same, vigor and just that same drive that everyone did. I'm going out of state, and I applied to every college outside of New York, Clark Atlanta. I applied to a college in Connecticut, which is actually where I ended up going. And I can't even remember a few other ones out of state. And we did put some CUNY ones on there, right? You had to do that because I think at that time you got five. If you were in a public school, you got five CUNY schools that you could apply to for free, where you didn't have to do didn't have to pay the application fee. So we did that. I did a few of those, got into those, of course, but I'm like, no, I'm going out of state. Like I'm doing the college dream out of state on campus thing, and I did it right. I went to Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I went to the University of Bridgeport there, and lo and behold, no one told us what it was really like going out of state, right? Like everybody's like, yeah, you got in, and then you get there, and then they slide that big bill under your door, and it's almost like having too much freedom. You're not really focused, and then it just kind of went a little bit downhill from there.
Mm. Yeah, Bridgeport isn't far. If you were old enough to drive, you could have commuted there, right?
Well, yeah, I did. I wasn't commuting, but I was able. I mean, things like an hour and a half drive.
Yeah.
It's very, very close.
Yeah. So, you get there, and there's a difference in pricing if you're a local student as opposed to an out of state student.
A very big difference. And here's the catch, they gave I think it was a $10,000 scholarship, which when I found out, first I thought I was special. I'm like, oh man, I got a scholarship. Found out they gave that to everybody, and it didn't even put a dent in what the tuition was. So it was just kind of like a little bait and hook type thing, because you felt like you got some money from the school, but it ain't put a dent in what that tuition bill was.
Yeah, it's funny when you are it takes decades of life experience before you realize how predatory some of these institutions can be to
Oh,
young
very, very,
educators.
very much so.
Yeah, so like a lot, you in the American dream, in the zeitgeist of the American dream, you say, I'm smart, I do my work, I'm gonna go get an education, and da 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 da. And then you find yourself on a campus. You might be a fish out of water. I don't know. Bridgeport isn't too foreign from growing up in Brooklyn or Chicago, whatever. But the financial burden that students are placed under can be stifling, can be incredible. Now, when you first see the bill, what do you do? How did you respond?
Well, the first response was, "Mama, we got." They telling me we got to pay this by, da 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 date. Now, listen, in our community, and not for everyone, so I don't like to generalize, but let me speak for my family first of all, right? Like my mom didn't finish, she didn't finish college. She went, but she didn't finish. But of course, when she went, it was a different time, right? It was, I'm pretty sure college was less, was way cheaper. But not only that, just walking through the process and steps of what it is to go away to school, what comes with it, the financial responsibility, how do you apply to take out loans, can you afford to even take out loans, can you afford to pay the bill, right? None of those things were really explained, and not when you don't have the knowledge to say to really look into it, right? It's one of those things where you just, as a mom, you're just happy that, hey, my son is going away to college, right? I can tell that to the neighbors. I can, call my girlfriend up and say, no, Tyler's going off to, he's in college and, out of state somewhere. So it was really one of those things. So when I called her and said it, she's like, well, wow, of course it's you going once again into survival mode. Well, how are we going to pay this? What we need to do? Can't take out loans or whatnot. So it was kind of like, all right, so what we go do? And then it was one of those. Well, you gonna have to go back to New York, and we gonna have to basically figure out what that next step is going to be, or kind of really start over, to be honest, because we just knew we weren't able to financially at that time pay that tuition.
Absolutely. So, wow. Okay. So first, what was your major when you were going to Bridgeport? What did you major?
Political science.
Political science. Okay. So now you find out you have to come back home. Are you looking for a poli sci school, or you're just looking to get back to CUNY?
So no, so actually, while all of this was going on, I actually had my first child, my son, who's 11 now. He was on the way, so he was supposed to be. He was born in January of 2013. So I'm in school between what is it, August and December of 2011. Excuse me, 2012. I'm in school, but he's on his way. So closer to that time, also, I'm thinking like, okay, how am I going to provide, right? So now that really the focus switched from education focus, right, school, college, to I need to find a job, right? So really going back to New York wasn't really a terrible thing, because it was like I got to get back down because I need to find a real job, because now I got somebody who's going to be looking to me for that support. So it really went the goal switch and the focus switch for me drastically.
Absolutely. So where did you transfer to?
I didn't. I just came. I just didn't finish. And I came back, and I actually just started working. So I didn't even transfer back into college right away.
Oh, okay, okay. So you worked to get your money up, and so now you're leaving college. What was this? And this is pre-pandemic. What was uh what were your job outlook? What did your career outlook look like at that time?
I didn't have one. To be honest, right in my head, it was, I'm gonna find a job at, in retail somewhere, right? At that time, right, I mean, when I was about 19-ish, I think about 19, maybe going on 20 at that time. So really, it was no 19, not even going on 20, probably just turned 19 actually. And it was really just, I'm gonna do the average 19-year-old jobs, Foot Locker, retail, some, McDonald's somewhere, and couldn't get a job there to save my life. I don't know. And to this day, I have never, ever, I'm gonna just say this as a disclaimer, I have never worked a retail job ever. And I'm kind of mad. Like, I'm kind of like, I can't even put, like, I worked at like Foot Locker, I couldn't get it, like, never worked it. And I had an aunt who was working at a residential facility for adults who had mental health and substance abuse. And she was a supervisor, and she's like, look, I mean, and she was the aunt. She passed, unfortunately, about a year, going on 2 years ago now. Um, but she was working, she was a supervisor there, and she was the aunt that, if you needed a job, she was one that was going to get you a job. And she got me a job there. And I think at that time it was about maybe $14 an hour, I'm going to say. But I was like, look, I just needed a job. Right. And so my first job was in social services. Like that was my first like official job was in social services. So I almost, I tell people I probably think I was destined for this because like I've been doing this since I was like 19 years old. Um, so yeah, that was the first job, and I was just happy to have a job. I was happy to just be able to a job with benefits, and can make a little overtime if needed because it was a 24/7 facility. So it was always coverage that was needed. So that's what I did. I left there, came back, few months, was looking, and then she got me that job there.
Okay, outstanding. So let's now you're really a New Yorker, right? You got a family in New York that you have to take care of. You have to make adult decisions. You have to make grown up decisions. And I'm a CUNY. I'm a product of CUNY. My mother actually went to Lehman. She didn't graduate, but she did a couple of years there. My sister and I both graduated from City College. Uh, and the CUNY student is different because you can be a CUNY student and have a family, right? Finish a full time slate of classes, and then have to go full time raise a family, or have to
Yep.
go full time to work. It's not mommy and daddy breaking open the checkbook and you living in the dorms and them giving you a it's nothing like that. But being a New Yorker and trying to navigate the you there's a lot of interesting challenges. You not a lot of unique perspectives for students. Okay, so you're a young man now. You have this major responsibility. God bless Auntie who gets you the job. You said $14 an hour. Now, just an approximation. At what point did you have a point when you realized I'm going to need to come up? This ain't enough. Did you have that moment?
Yeah, did that for about a little bit. Transitioned to another organization. I think at that time the salary was about 32,000. So you couldn't tell me that I wasn't balling because I went. I think that salary was 21,000, and I went to 32,000. So I mean that was a big jump at that time. I was like, man, I'm balling. I mean, so I did that for a while. Did that. It was I was working with a homeless outreach organization, and then I transitioned, started doing like caseworker work, and I think that was maybe about 35. But then I noticed that everyone who had degrees were making like 45, and then they started going up and up. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, so I got to do something here now, right? Because then I started to see if I really, right? Because I kind of had hit at that moment or that time I hit the ceiling, right? I wasn't, at all the jobs where I wanted to move up, it was like, you got to get a degree, be in progress of a degree, you got to do something. And I said, okay, I'm going to go back to school. And tried to tried to get into CUNY, and lo and behold, everyone said, "Oh, well, you're not a freshman; you are a transfer student, which means we need your transcripts from other schools." Now, mind you, this is before New York passed that state or right or most where you that law where you don't need to you don't have you can still have a balance and get like that wasn't it then, right? And Bridgeport said, well, you owe us, I think at that time, $10,000. You owe us $10,000. We're not releasing any transcripts. Now, mind you, the transcripts didn't have anything but F's on them. I can tell you that for sure. The transcripts had nothing but F's on them. And they said, well, and CUNY said, well, you can't come in as a freshman. And if you apply and we find out that you went to another school and basically didn't report it, we can ban you from CUNY for 5 years. And I said, damn it. I said, man, I'm not. I said, okay, I don't want to risk that. Ended up so then I went to DeVry. Well, I applied to go to DeVry, and I think I maybe did a few months. And then I was like, this ain't it either. Something missing here. Stopped going, but I was still persistent. And I said, I got to figure out a way. And then lo and behold, it was a worker who ended up working at BMCC, and he worked in the financial aid department. He did that like part-time, and somebody said, oh, such and such works at BMCC, you should talk to him. And I said, he does? I said, yeah. So I found out who he was and had a conversation, and he told me how to get in, and I said, man, that's not going. And he said, trust me. He said, I've seen 1 million students do it. He said, I did it 3 times myself. And I said, okay, I'm gonna try it. And I did what he said. It was nothing, disclaimer, it was nothing illegal, but it was a way to get in. And lo and behold, I got in. And the whole first semester, I'm nervous. I'm like, nope, something go come back to bite me. I'm going in, and I'm at the third, like almost close to the last semester, and I get a call from the dean's office, and the dean called, and I had to schedule a meeting. They had put a hold on my account. I couldn't register for that semester, and I said, I knew it. Said, it's coming back to bite me. And I'm meeting with the dean, and the dean said, hey, look, it was found out that you went to this school and whatever did report it. And I said, look, I wasn't trying to lie. I wasn't trying to get over. I'm like, look, I'm just trying to get back in school so I can provide a better life for myself and family. And he's like, look, I understand. So he said, I'm going to have to send this to the CUNY review board, and then I'm going to let you know what they say. I said, okay. So I'm thinking this is it. I'm done. School career is over. 2 days before class, I now have to register. I say, hey, the hold is still there. I don't know what the verdict was. And all he emailed back to his assistant on the email, released the hold. And thanks be to God, I don't know what happened. I don't know what the outcome was, but thanks be to God, I graduated from BMCC in the middle of the pandemic, and I went on to Medgar Evers, and that was it.
Man, that is a beautiful story. So I'm getting emotional. I'm getting emotional hearing your story. So first of all, thank you for your time. And I can unpack this for a half hour, right? I can unpack the rest of
Listen
for a half hour, but I'm not going to take too much of your time. Thank you so much for sharing. But I'm going to ask you this. Like I mentioned earlier, our biggest demographic is students, CUNY students, who might be going through similar challenges, trying to get from here to there and whatever. What lesson can you share from your experiences? What do students need to hear before we wrap up our call? And thank you. And you can take as long as you want on this answer. Bring up anything that I may have neglected to question you about, but what do students need to hear as far as what you gleaned from your journey?
This is what I'll tell anybody, but especially students, is it's not easy, and the journey is hard, and many obstacles are going to come in your way. I mean, many. But for me, and what I always tell anyone is, keep the goal in front of you, whatever that goal is. My goal at some point when I knew that I wanted to be a social worker was, I am going to be a social worker, and nothing by no means is going to stop me. And that was the goal that I kept in front of me at all times, is I see myself at the finish line at every stage. Right, I see myself at the finish line of being a social worker, but I've also seen myself at the finish line of getting my associates. I see myself at the finish line of getting my bachelor's. I see myself at the finish line of getting my master's. And because I kept that at all times, even when I wanted to go, okay, this is too much, I kept that always in front of me, right? And then when I got to those finish lines, the joy that you feel from walking across the stage, the joy you get from getting a diploma in your hand that has your name on it, that says, confer you as associates of this, a bachelor's of this, a master's of this, is greater than any obstacle I think that you could ever face, because you know that you put in the work to get to that point, and no one can take it away from you. Once you got it, no one can take it away from you, right? So, even when it gets tough, keep going. Even when you want to quit, keep going. Even when they tell you that you ain't gonna make it, keep going. And that's just keep going. Like it's not easy, right? I wish it was easy. I tell like, sometimes we have the ideal life, and I know society, you graduate high school and then you do this and then you do that, right? But sometimes life don't work that way. And you also have to be okay and be comfortable enough to say, maybe I didn't do it how everyone else did it. I did it my way, but I got it done. And that's the biggest thing that I would tell anybody, especially those going into school. Like it's not gonna be easy. It's gonna be hard. But just keep going. Just keep going.
Tyler Charles, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Uh you mentioned you have four kids.
Yes.
Did you mention you had four kids?
Yes, I did.
And
Yep.
all of them have two first names, right?
Just
They all
yeah.
so they all suffer from two first names.
Yep.
Well, your story, I love your story, man. I love your perseverance. Uh, I found out I just graduated from college uh to almost 2.5 weeks ago, right? I just got my master's degree. And I've learned so much. I've learned so
Congratulations.
much returning to college in reference to how certain zip codes, if you well, thank you. If you grow up in a certain zip code, they almost write you off just because you grew up in a zip code.
Yep.
I didn't know that then, right? I didn't know that 20 years ago, 10 years ago. I know it now. So when I hear the stories of people who, take the journey from, a community college associate's degree to bachelor's degree to master's degree to PhD, you go as far as you wish. But the 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 type of obstacles that are presented in front of people, the type of challenges that scholars face and have to overcome are way different from, someone whose parents, are just paying their tuition, and you don't have to work and you don't have to, you just go and you study and you succeed.
Yep.
So I really appreciate your story, and thank you so much for sharing. Now, just to make sure, was there anything that you want to shout out or mention or whatever that I neglected to ask you about?
No, first of all, let me say thank you, because you are, first of all, you are a wonderful just moderator. I mean, I first came across you at the imposter syndrome panel discussion we had a few weeks ago, and even from there, so even when you just said you was a stand up comedic for a living, I was like, I could see that, like I could see that. So no, thank you. No, I think we covered it all. I mean, I like telling my story because I know that there's somebody who probably didn't do it the traditional way, and because they didn't do it the traditional way, sometimes it can be discouraging. Um, but don't let that be, And don't get me wrong, that is, there's never times that I didn't think about that, but I never let that be. That's not the deciding factor. So what, I didn't do it. There's no such thing as normal. I tell people that all the time because what's normal to me might not be normal to you. This is my norm. This is how I did it, but I did it. And don't let anyone tell you other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tyler. I appreciate it. Very nice meeting you, and I'll see you at the next one. All right.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye.